tell you, I know that we have a few here in the congregation, and there are some tuning in. We heard that Johnny is wrestling with vertigo. My mother, I guess it was the same thing. She called it inner ear trouble.
Meniere's disease.
Yeah, inner ear trouble when it started out. And then Alfred Hitchcock made a movie about it, and it's Jimmy Stewart, wasn't he?
Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah. It's hard for me to keep all those Hitchcock movies separated, though I do. I have no trouble keeping Psycho and Birds separate. They stick in my mind. Kind of makes the world spin and dip around and makes you seem to appreciate what our balance does for us as far as making us feel normal. I've never had it, but I understand it makes you feel very nauseated. So, it's good to see you this morning. Glad that you're here. Last week we started a journey that comes from a mention in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 20. He says, I have 30 wise sayings to say to you. I can imagine sitting down with my father, and my father sitting on the throne with his crown and everything. He says, got 30 things I want to tell you. 30, huh? Yeah. I probably shouldn't do this, and I probably won't. But I have a lot of articles and messages and lessons and writings that pass through my mind that never make it on page or to screen. Here's one of them, because a lot of them are just really my spouting off. It seems that everybody in the world now is a writer. They have Facebook and all the social media, and so I work for NASA, so I hate anagrams. I hate letters, NSA, NASA, or POC, or PPE. We have thousands of them, and so people will be talking to me, and it's like it's in code. But I don't like abbreviations, and it drives me crazy. And this is just my mental illness. I'm not just being critical of people, certainly not looking down on people. It's just like a painting on the wall that's crooked when people use bad punctuation. Or if they use the word Y-O-U-R, your, when they really mean Y-O-U apostrophe R-E. Or if they use the word to instead of T-O-O. And I'm looking at that. And, but here's the big thing. People write, and I know that it's something very important, and they have something on their heart that they want to say. And it's got, I click on their post, and it's got about 1,000 words in it. Not one paragraph spacing at all. It's just like they went, never taking a breath. Just, you should write.
Like an auctioneer.
Yeah, as you talk. And when I see a big block of text, my eyes start to go to my nose, and I start getting a headache. This big block of text, and about 99 times out of 100, I just skip it, because if I read that big block of text that has 1,000, 1,500 words in it, my head's going to hurt at the end. When you change thoughts, or when you're going into the next idea, make a space. Space it up. And if you say, I have 30 things I want to tell you, number them, bullet, 1, 2, and kind of, because it's very important that if you say something of value, if it's worth thinking about. And I believe that there are many people out there. I have many, many wonderful friends that I treasure what they say, and I value their information and their passion. But when they say something, I want to pause. And I'm going to go, My uncle, I'm going on tangents this morning. My uncle Monroe told me the lazy man's way for putting up fence posts. He said, get you about 10 or 15 buckets or jugs of water and post hole digger. He said, pour you some water out on the ground where that post is going to go. Just pour some water from the jug. Ordinary water. Doesn't have to be clean water. Then take your post hole digger after him. He said, go sit underneath the tree. Go get in the shade. And then come back out with post hole digger, and that dirt is nice and mushy for about 3 or 4 inches. And you get it out of there. And you got a little hole there now, and that was so easy because that wet dirt is so soft. And so you dig that out, put the dirt over here, or in a wheelbarrow, whatever you're doing with it. And then pour that hole full of water. Guess what? There's some sweet tea waiting for you underneath the shade tree over there. And, he was telling me, son, this is the way I dig post hole. And so I never have forgotten it. I have never dug many fence post holes or holes in my life, probably 25 or 30 at most. That would make someone who grew up on a farm laugh, I suppose. But reading, I really became invested when I was in college in speed reading. I've almost abandoned what I would call speed reading. I can still do it. I can read a page or 2 at a time. But now, as I've grown older, I'll read a paragraph and I'll go sit underneath the shade tree like an old cow and I'll chew that cud for hours, think about it. But if you're writing one great old big block, and you just never even take a breath, and my head hurts, and I don't see a stopping place, and I don't know if you finished that last thought before you started this next one or not. Use paragraphs. Oh, I feel so much better already. I got 30 things I want to tell you. And the book of Proverbs, the whole book is kind of like that. Doing a study like this, where you're studying the book of Proverbs, is kind of counterproductive, I think. We're covering ground. We're covering material. We're looking at the material. But I really think you ought to maybe take one proverb, let it soak in a while. Study the book of Proverbs occasionally. Go to there. Find the verse. Find the passage. And the same thing about teaching a class, teaching our loved ones. There are certain people that God brings into our life who are younger than us, or they're at a different stage in their journey. Maybe they're a young Christian. Maybe they're a new Christian. I think a young Christian can be any age, but a new Christian can be any age. And so, one of the things about school is that sometimes your teacher will say, here are 3 chapters, and we're going to have a test on it on Friday. It's just not a way to learn. Learning is a lifetime process. I hope to keep learning new things and adding to my knowledge and my wisdom as I grow older. But I've learned about what the Bible teaches about meditation. You're not going to hear many sermons. I don't know of a quartet song about meditation. I don't know many Sunday school lessons about meditation. I still, all the time, every day, a part of my day is spent going back to things my grandmother said many, many years ago. I can remember things that teachers said to me that maybe they didn't even make an impression upon me at the time. I don't spend all my time in the past, but I'm still wrestling with things that I have heard in the past and I've learned, books that I've read. And that's why sometimes I'll go back and I'll reread a book. And that's why often I keep continuing to read the Bible. Now, we covered 15 of these 30 things last week, and as I said, we're going through here, but to do these last 15 is your mind and your heart just kind of says, that's almost too much to think about at one time. But here we are. Let's do it. Now, saying 16 is about secret agents and their agency. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. But the truth, buy the truth and do not sell it. Wisdom, instruction, and insight as well. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. May your father and mother rejoice. May she who gave you birth be joyful. The unsung heroes of wisdom are good mothers and fathers. We go through spells when we hang upon every word that our parents said. And we cherish when they will speak to us and talk to us. I grew up in a generation where people didn't speak to children very much. Didn't talk to them except when to give them orders. And now I see my daughter in her generation. Well, and Terry and I could include even though we're baby boomers, we spoke to our children. We didn't use baby talk. We had conversations with our children. It was not just to fuss at them or even to instruct them. Sometimes we just talked to them. Now, last weekend, we had our granddogs. We had two of our old pugs. They're almost too old to even move about. And the cat, who is young and incessantly poking her nose into everything. And I know why curiosity killed the cat, because it crossed my mind so many times during the weekend that I thought, if I just killed her, she would quit that. But every time you open a drawer or a cabinet or a door, she would shoot in. Every time you opened the door to the garage or outside, she would shoot out. Terry talks to the dogs and the cat. And I don't just mean like, hi kitty, or how's it? She has conversations with the dogs. And then she goes out, and the dogs come and look up at me, and they do their heads like this. And I say, I got nothing. I don't know what to talk with you about. But I can be back in my bedroom, and Terry's just talking, just having a conversation. I think maybe she's talking to somebody on the phone. She's talking to the dogs. And they're looking at them, and they're doing their heads. That's what pugs do. Trying to understand. Now, we used to hang upon every word of our parents, and then we got to a place where we didn't want to hear our parents anymore, and we didn't want to hear what they had to say. We didn't care what they had to say. And then we get back to a place again when perhaps our parents are gone, and we wish that we could hear their voice again. And then many, many, many times I faced life's decisions, and I wish that I could talk to my dad or my mom. All right. They are the secret agents in our life. He's talking about parents. Number 17, wayward women. I don't know if I want to hear what a man who has 700 wives, I don't know if I want to hear what he has to say about women. I don't know if he's ever learned anything. Or maybe he has. Maybe you could sit down with a guy who had 700 wives and he says, let me tell you a thing or two about women.
Well, there's one thing, he cornered the market.
Yeah, he married everything around, I guess. That was marital, it seems to me. He said, let me tell you something about wayward women. He said, all right, go ahead. Obviously, you've had some experience. Hey, there's no question that there are wayward men. And if you're married to 700 women, some of them are going to be wayward. And I don't know exactly what that means. Earlier in the book of Proverbs, he called them strange women. Wayward you might let that slide. Strange women, you might not. My son, give me your heart and let your eyes delight in my ways. For an adulterous woman is a deep pit, and a wayward wife is a narrow well. You know what the problem is with the narrow well? They had to dig it. You can lower the bucket, okay, but when you start pulling it up, if it's a narrow well, what?
It'll get stuck.
The water.
And the water will spill out.
Yeah, if it's narrow, what it means is it's going to clip the sides. It's not concrete or steel. And so if you're using a narrow well, when it comes up, it's going to be muddy water, pretty much. You need a big well. Very good. You're right. You're going to spill some of the water out, perhaps, because you're all like a bandit. She lies in wait and multiplies the unfaithful among men. Now, he does have a take on men right here. He said, you know what he's really saying there, don't you? Men are so dumb. Men are so dumb. He says, she multiplies the unfaithful among men. She makes, how many unfaithful men are there? Well, there's about to be more because there's a woman out there and she's on prowl. Now, this does go both ways, but it appears that women are not dumb in that way, and men are. And women do seem to have the advantage in the wiles department. That's enough of that. It sounds like I have 700 wives. Number 18, the drunken dullard. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has strife? Who has complaints? Who has needless bruises and bloodshot eyes? Those who linger over wine. Now, he doesn't say those who drink wine, but those who linger over wine. In other words, wine is like something that they spend a lot of time with. Do not gaze at wine when it's red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. Oh, this guy's had some wine before, it sounds like.
Well, see, he's talking about fermentation.
Yeah. In the end, it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. However, if you look at the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, don't do it now. Look at the last chapter of the book of Proverbs, and he says, is any among you sad or depressed? Drink a little wine. So, you can find verses, there are lots of verses in Proverbs and in the Bible about drunkenness and excess. And then you'll see some prophet drinking wine, or Jesus making wine, or drinking wine. And listen, I have read everything for 50 years. I've read everything that I could ever see or find or came across that taught about biblical wines. I've never been convinced that the Bible wines were non-alcoholic. I do know the history of, I do understand the chemical makeup of wine and fermentation. And if you make a big, strong case for instance, grape juice or must, then there was no refrigeration. There was no way of keeping any drink or any kind of food cool, or the only way of preserving any kind of food pretty much was by fermentation. And they ferment just about everything. If you kept grape juice around longer than a couple of days, it would sour and ruin unless you promoted the fermentation process. So I've never been convinced that what all these people in the Bible are drinking is grape juice. That's my point of view. The Bible, a dozen times, like right here, it says, don't even look at it. I had a friend who got saved right after coming out of the Army many years ago, and he loves beer. And he found this, he brought this to me. He says, don't even look at it when it's swirling around in the glass. He says, because you just want some of it. Well, and then but you'll find that mostly what the Bible says is about drunkenness. Your eyes will see strange sights, he says in verse 33 of chapter 23. Pink elephants, and woozles. Your mind will imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on top of the rigging. They hit me, you will say, and I'm not hurt. They beat me, and I don't feel it. I'm reminded of that Toby Keith song, I'm not as good as I once was. His friend gets in a fight in the bar, and he has to help him out. But go ahead and hit me. I'm so inebriated I won't even feel it. You feel it tomorrow, though. When will I wake up so that I can find another drink? That's obviously a person who has trouble with drinking, a problem with drinking. Number 19, bad company. Do not envy the wicked. Do not desire their company, for their hearts plot violence, and their lips talk about making trouble. Well, don't hang around violent people who are bad company. Number 19. Number 20. house construction. He says, here's how to build a house. By wisdom, a house is built. Now, he's not talking about the foundation and the walls and the ceiling or the roof. He's talking about a home, really. He's talking about a place where people live. And through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. And he's not talking about gold and silver. The psalmist, you know what he compared children to? He said they're like arrows.
Arrows in a
Quiver.
quiver.
He says, blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. Children are what you shoot. Put that in your bow, and it's what you aim. These are from you, and you're aiming them out in the world. I'm sending them out, and they're going to do good, or they're going to make change. He says they're like arrows. He said you can send kids out to do those things. Beautiful treasures. Number 21. Wise words win wars. I think, again, that the most common words that Solomon ever uttered in order to prevent wars was, will you marry me? The wise prevail through great power, and those who have knowledge muster their strength. Surely you need guidance to wage war, and victory is won through many advisors. So here, I think he is talking about combat, but he's talking about also conflict. Conflict. And he says it requires, there are things worth fighting for. There are battles we must engage in. We can't avoid conflict always. But if it is worth fighting, we must fight wisely. Number 22, rebel rascals. Wisdom is too high for fools. In the assembly at the gate, they must not open their mouth. In other words, he says, here are people, their whole point for speaking is to cause dissent. They're not interested in making a point or advancing a cause. There are people in the world today that I can see their speeches and their tirades and rants on social media. They're not trying to have a discussion. They're shouting so that nobody else can be heard. And I can tell that there's no reasoning behind their words at all. They're simply choosing words and selecting words completely because those words are inflammatory.
And all they want to do is stir things up.
That's right. They are only wanting to say things, and the words are flagrantly chosen to solicit a violent response. Worst thing in the world you can do is respond to them. Number 23. I'm sorry. 23. Slippery schemer. Whoever plots evil will be known as a schemer. Schemes are not good things. A scheme and a plan are not the same. A scheme has negative designs. A plot is never, there's nothing ever good about plotting something. The schemes of folly are sin, and people detest a mocker. Number 24, pressure problem. If you falter in a time of trouble, how small is your strength? He doesn't really say how to avoid this or how to lessen the peril. But he says, there are going to be times in your life when making an important decision matters than another. When you come to your closet and you can't determine which shirt to wear, that's one thing. But he says there are other decisions that you're going to make. That's when you need to come through. You need to make the right choice. He says you can't fall apart. You can't become unraveled when the heat is on and when it's very, very, very important. Number 25. Warn the unwary. Rescue those being led away to death. Many years ago, Bill Cosby did a little skit that was entitled Hoof and Mouth Disease. he talked about two cows that were kind of being herded along, and the two cows are talking to each other. It's hilarious. One of the cows said, and I'm not going to try to imitate cow voices, I don't really speak very good cow. He says, where are we going? He says, we're going to get shot. He says, what? He says, yeah, we're going to get shot. He says, well, why? He says, because we've got hoof and mouth disease. He says, hoof and mouth disease? He says, what's that? He said, see that foam around your mouth? He said, yeah. That's hoof and mouth disease. He says, any way I can get out of it? He said, yeah. Wipe that foam from around your mouth. People being led to slaughter. Hold back those staggering towards slaughter. If you say, but we knew nothing about this, does not he who weighs the heart perceive it? Does not he who guards your life know it? Will he not repay everyone according to what they have done? He says, you're headed down this path, and yes, God knows it. And you can say, I didn't know. He says, well, I'm just telling you. Wipe that foam from around your mouth. All right, here we go. Number 26, sweet success. Eat honey, my son, for it is good. Honey from the comb is sweet to your taste. Know also that wisdom is like honey for you. If you find if there's a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off. So he says, you know what? You've had some honey. Isn't that good? He said, well, wisdom is like that. Wisdom is like that. Learn to enjoy its taste. Number 27. Bounce back. Do not lurk like a thief near the house of the righteous, nor do not plunder their dwelling place. For though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again. But the wicked stumble when calamity strikes. He's talking about a righteous man, and something has gone wrong in their life. They've failed. They've collapsed. He says, you know what the tendency is to do? Let's go over there and pick his bones. Let's go over there and kick him while he's down. Let's take away. He's weak. He's down. He's on his back. Let's go in there and take advantage of his discomfiture. And he says, no, I won't do that. He says, if a righteous man falls, even if he loses everything and falls in it, he says, even though he falls 7 times, he'll rise again. He'll rise again. The wicked stumble, and when calamity strikes, so they're probably not going to get up. Number 28. Weep over others' woes. Do not gloat when your enemy falls. Jesus taught this as well. When they stumble, do not let your heart rejoice. Or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from them. I like to win. And sometimes I have enjoyed seeing others lose. It's a human tendency. It's not a good tendency. It shows a dark side of human beings. But here he says, don't rejoice when others fall, even your enemies. Saying 29, wicked worry. Do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the wicked. For the evildoer has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked shall be snuffed out. So it says, I think that's the biggest. I don't think that the problem today is that there are a lot of wicked people in the world. I don't think that there are any more wicked people in the world, except maybe population growth. Per capita, I don't believe that there are any more bad people in the world today than there have ever been. I know that people think, well, things are worse than they've ever been. Well, they're just not. All you have to do is study just a little bit of history. And you can find times in human history that were 100 times worse than things are today.
It's just the way things are now. We hear about it faster.
That's right. Hear about it more often. We have 24 hours of news and people telling us how terrible things are. I think we're worried about evildoers. I think we're worried and we fret about what bad people are doing or going to do. It's not profitable. Here's the last one. He said, you got to he says, there's going to be a test. I want you to tell me about the 30 things that I've told you about. Here's the last one. Resist rebels. Fear the Lord and the king, my son. And do not join with rebellious officials, for those too will send sudden destruction on them. And who knows what calamities they can bring. Fear the Lord. Now, we never probably have, even at our worst times or the worst among us, have said, you know what, we need a new Lord. We talk about the Lord and about God, creator of heaven and earth. We just need to replace him. We need another one. We need to get rid of this one. Nobody's there. There was only one person that had the insanity to rise up and say, we're going to overthrow the Lord.
Yeah.
That was Satan. But there have been lots of kings who have been assassinated. Lots of kings have been replaced. But the Bible teaches that person, it doesn't matter how good a king he is or how bad a king he is, he's the king because God made him king. I know that many people who believe in the divine right of kings believe that since the king has been placed on their throne by God, that means they're always right. Well, that's not true. But we're not supposed to obey all the laws that we think are good or that we enjoy or that we agree with or that we like. We're to obey the laws. Obey the king. Those, he says, rebellious officials. I've had many leaders over my life. And sometimes people will come to me and say, we're going to have a mutiny. We're going to have an uprising. We're going to have a protest. We're going to walk out. We're going to sit down. We're going to rebel. My tendency is always to stick with my commanding officer. I might go to my commanding officer and say, you know what, may I speak freely, sir, or ma'am? If they have any wisdom at all, they'll say, go ahead. I say, all right, here I go. But I've never been mutinous. There was an Ammonite soldier who came into King David's presence. You know what he bragged about? He said, sir, I came here to tell you that Saul, your enemy, is dead. I killed him. Yeah. You know what he was expecting?
A reward of some kind.
This incensed David. David had had many occasions. He could have killed Saul. He proved it, that he could have killed Saul at any given time. David stood up on his feet and he said, how dare you touch God's anointed? And he turned over to Joab and he says, fall on him. He did. He killed that guy right there. Killed him. He got his reward. He was the king. He was the king. You don't kill the king, David would say. Yes, Saul was turning over heaven and earth trying to find David so they could kill him. He'd thrown a spear at him once, tried to pin him to the wall. There was a time, though, when David crept from a cave where Saul had been sleeping, and he held up a piece of Saul's garment that he'd cut off with a knife. He says, check your garment out there. Look at your clothes. If he did, it was a piece that had been cut off. You know what Saul said? You're a better man than I. You're a better man than I. I can see why the Lord favors you. I can see why the Lord favors you. You're a good guy. And he called all his troops on and said, we're not going to be hunting David anymore. Well, rebellious officials. Sometimes people are going to come to you at your job and they say, we're going to get rid of the boss. We're going to unthrone the supervisor. Don't have any part of something like that. I mean, you got a problem with someone, go to them, talk to them. Man to man, woman to woman, man to woman, woman to man. You got a problem, go, face it. Deal up with it. Go to that person. Don't be a part of treason and movements and ganging up. No. If you feel like you need to get people who agree with you and believe the same way you do, and let's all get together and let's pull somebody down. That's what he's talking about right here. It is godless. It is cowardly. God doesn't approve of that. That's why they were so surprised when they came to arrest Jesus. And they said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I am he. And they all just fell to the ground. That's me. Well, that's 30 things. Thank you for going. We're going to continue on. Doing this lesson in 2 parts is going to put us kind of a lesson behind, but we're not going to cover it all. And even if we just took one verse or one passage or one saying every Sunday, it'd still be better than saying, well, we looked at every jot and tittle. Well, we probably didn't, but there's great wisdom there. And I would say to you that if there are things that have made you ponder, or things that have made you think, so far in this study, spend a lifetime studying the book of Proverbs and spend a lifetime becoming wise. I think it'll take that long and longer. All right, God bless you all. Thank you so much.